Now there are channels for the wires in the bottom of the fuselage assembly, and the ones coming from the rear of the wing are going to be going through the center hole right here. Those are the aileron wires, and then the landing gear are going to come in one from each side like this, and you're going to want to get those into the cockpit area as you bring the wing down. Now there's no really easy way to film this to see what's going on, so I'll just point that out to you, know that that's what I'm doing as I pivot the wing around and spend a couple minutes trying to get the wires down into those holes and through the channels to get them into the cockpit. So we'll bring the wing around. Push the landing gear through. And then I'm going to be using a 6-channel receiver, and so in this case I'm going to be, instead of using the Y cord, I'm going to use 2 extensions on the aileron plugs on the back. So it looks like I've got those through. Before I screw this down, I'm going to hold the wing on and pivot it. So I can see inside the cockpit, and I have just a pair of forceps here that I'm going to reach in and pull those wires to make sure that before I bind them too tight with the screws that I've got them fully inside the cockpit. And now I do. Plenty of wire there. The little labels turned out to be the big thing in terms of kind of causing a problem getting through that channel. So we've got them all in there. They're looking good. We're going to flip over again. And now I'm simply going to drop the screws in, make sure they find their way into the proper holes. Same for the front. Number 4. And it's starting to look like an airplane. Now the fuselage has a lot of room for your electronics, and depending upon the kind of radio you're using, it'll probably differ a little bit from mine. But let me show you a little bit about what's going on inside. Here you've got the Y cord for the landing gear. You've got the lead from the ESC coming from the front, along with the power leads to the ESC. I'm using an Orange brand or a Spectrum type knockoff receiver, along with its satellite extension, which is mounted just right on the fuselage wall over here. The servos are in the back that control the tail surfaces. Got everything hooked up, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm using a 6-channel receiver, so I've got all of the plugs used in this receiver, with the ailerons going to the aileron connector and the aux connector. This is an external BEC, and let me talk a little bit about that. One of the things I like to do with my larger models and models running with 4 cells or more is to have an external BEC or battery eliminator circuit. There are a couple of things that you need to do when planning to configure your airplane this way. One is on the lead coming from the ESC, what I found the easiest thing to do is on the connector at the receiver end is take your hobby knife and just pry up the little restraining clip on the plug, and then pull the power wire out. And so I've got the red wire pulled out and then just taped down. That will allow me just to fold it back and plug it in if I want to use it in a different configuration. The other thing I like to do with external BECs is that they need power too, and that normally comes with 2 very thin wires. And so I've connected a JST plug here, and then I've got one of these little adapters that I got at a hobby shop. They're molded together like this, and they're Deans, but they have this tap that comes off that allows me to power without having to do a lot of extra soldering. Because these have banana plug kind of connectors, I just made some connectors to convert the wire from a banana plug to a Dean so that I can use this little plug. If you're going directly using the BEC on the electronic speed control, none of this is going to be necessary, obviously. So then the BEC plugs into the battery port on this receiver. So I've got the power going into the battery. I've got the throttle coming from the ESC going into the throttle without the power line, so I don't want to power the receiver using both the external and the ESC. I've had a couple of instances where there have been some pretty spectacular crashes when I've gotten the magic smoke from the ESC when that released. And so in doing this, you can burn up the ESC, have other malfunctions in the ESC, and still have power to your receiver. So it's these little guys are pretty cheap, they're easy to deal with, and so I like to add them to my airplanes. And then the last is just using the battery. Again, I've got connectors on it, so it's a little extra stuff, but it's a big airplane. The little extra weight's not going to matter. And in this case, the battery just drops in and goes way down in the channel to the front, giving you some opportunity there to use a larger battery. There's room in there. This one happens to be a 22, a 2650 would work, and maybe even a 3000. And so that's pretty much what we've got inside the model. So let's take a look at just a couple of the last finishing steps as we finish up this F-4U. The Dynam kit comes with some nice decals, but since I changed the paint job, many of the large roundels aren't going to work because they assume a full blue background. So I got some other decals from a hobby shop that are of the same scale and for this type of airplane, and you can see I've got some of that put on. Just as the last step, I've got the victory flags that go on beside the cockpit, and to do that, what I like to do is, cut the decal out as close as I can, and then I cut a little bit of the backing off the back so that I can place the decal where I want it and move it around without it wrapping up on itself. And when I get it where I want it, I can just run my thumb over the sticky part of the decal and then just fold it over and work its way down slowly so that I don't end up with a lot of wrinkles, bends, or the decal folding back on itself. So now I've got the flags on, and you can see some of the other decals perhaps that I've placed on the model. I'll zoom out here a little bit and you can see. So we've got the decals on, we've got the flags on, we're ready to go with the last two steps. Just two things remain. One is putting on the antenna on the back of the fuselage. I'm going to again just use the glue that came with the kit, drop a little on the connection side here. Drop it in. Pull it out to get the glue down in there. Okay. Wipe off a little of that extra, and then attach the propeller. Now I've gone in and programmed the radio, I've programmed the receiver, and I've done all of that with the propeller off, just from a safety perspective. So I've got the propeller put together on the nice hub. I'm just going to use the screwdriver that came with the kit to provide a little friction there to put that on. These are friction collets. And there we are. The model's complete. Looks pretty good. Now for a couple of closing thoughts on the Dynam F-4U. First, the form, fit, and finish of the parts was very good. They all fit together. The paint job was good. They were packed in the box well, and so they arrived at my door in really good shape. The Dynam model allows for some modification, in this case the paint job changes that I made. Also, the pilot figure is really nice. He's painted up, he's at the right scale, and he's of the right era for the airplane that is being modeled. And so that's a real nice plus in this case. Plus, it comes with an extra propeller. So if you happen to ding it up, you've got one before you have to order yet another one. So what's on the not so good side? Well, the instructions leave a little bit to be desired. They show most of the steps, but for my way of thinking, they weren't exactly in the right order. I'd like to get the tail feathers on so I don't have to be messing around with a big wing in my workshop while I'm doing other little things where the instructions showed the wing going on first. But it shows what needs to be done. The order is just a little bit suspect. If you've ever built a foam model before, you're not going to notice it anyway. The other thing is the wing supports. I mentioned it in the video. I added those extra support spars between the two halves of the wing. It would have been nice if there would have been a heavy spar connecting the two halves of the wing. You know, this is a warbird. You're going to anticipate flying it aggressively. 14.8 volt or 4-cell LiPo batteries is going to give it some power, and so you'd hate to have the wings collapse on you and turn this beautiful fuselage into a lawn dart as it comes down out of the sky. And so that was probably the weakest point, and it's worth some attention. If you're flying at scale and not too aggressively, you maybe not need to worry about it, but I certainly would add those support as I showed you in the video. As with all the Dynam models that I've had, it turned out to be a really fun project. I hope you found this informative.